people. My name is Dr. George Sparks. I'm an archaeologist for Bible Interact. In the news lately, at least in the archaeology news within the last year, it's been announced that a group, an evangelical group, had uncovered a small lead tablet with an ancient writing style inside of it, which is called a defixio. Lately, we've had the peer review also published, and a number of articles and scholars have responded to this lead tablets peer review in this article. And this is what I'd like to talk to you about today. And I wrote it down. There's a lot of information, so if I'm looking back and forth on my paper, that's why. So be patient. Let's get through this. I think you will find this interesting. A lot of information. You might not agree. You might agree. Either way, if you like it, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Now let's start this off. About a year ago, a group of evangelical archaeologists announced that they found a small lead tablet while sifting in the excavated, discarded remains from a location on Mount Ebal. So this was an excavation that was actually performed in the 1980s. And the debris from the excavation was compiled in a number of debris mounds. And this group went in and they sifted through the debris from these earthen mounds, remains from the archaeology. So they've been sitting for over 40 years. All right. So they claim that in this debris, they found a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter lead tablet, which contained the oldest known written name of the name that should not be named. In addition, they also made a proclamation. They made several proclamations, but one that the text was the earliest known evidence of the divine tetragrammaton, which is the divine name, which evoked on this tablet an ancient curse. And an ancient curse on this lead tablet has got an archaeological name called a defixio. So maybe a Hispanic defixio is a male curse, a defixia is a female curse. Of course, I'm just joking. But anyway, at the same time, this defixio was announced to the public. There was also a number of claims that this item would also prove, number one, that because of its early writing style, an early exodus and an early conquest. So there's a number of different theories about when the Hebrews left Egypt on what we call the Exodus. And one is called the early date. It's a very literal reading of the Bible and its chronology. The date is 1446. We'd be in the 18th dynasty of Egypt. That makes the conquest, if they were wandering for 40 years, a literal 40 years, around 1400 BC. So they're trying to have a biblical bias towards a very literal chronology. Okay, there's another train of thought, another school, in which they take more of an academic approach through archaeology. And the excavated remains that they have found in Israel, over 50 years of excavating, seems to validate a 1260 Exodus, which would be 19th dynasty, time period of Ramses. And also, therefore, if we once again take 40 years wandering in the wilderness, would put us in the land, the promised land of Israel, around 1220. Okay, we also have a confirmation of Israel in the land in a stela called the Mount stela, where Israel was also mentioned in the stela dates to around, I believe, 1210, but still 19th dynasty. And Merneptah was actually Ramses the Great's 13th son. So very interesting stuff. Now back to the text here. So number one, it would have one of the earliest known written names of the divine God of the Hebrews. And secondly, it states that since we had an early writing, okay, that Moses could have written the Pentateuch. Now, many scholars don't believe that Moses wrote the Pentateuch, especially secular scholars. They believe the Bible took many centuries and it was edited, and this editing was by individuals which we know as redactors. Okay, now this writing style, which they say, well, this proves an early alphabet, which is kind of odd that they would say this, because around 100 years ago, there's a discovery in the Sinai Desert by an archaeologist called Sir Flinders Petrie. This happened around 1905, so well over 100 years ago now. And in the Sinai wilderness, in the mountains, if you will, in an old mining establishment, I think it was for turquoise, they found an early dialect writing style of an alphabet. So we have known alphabets for over 100 years. I believe this is called the Proto-Sinaitic, after the Sinai, Sinaitic writing, okay, but it's an early alphabet. So I believe possibly what they meant is that this would prove that Moses wrote the Pentateuch, not so much that there's an alphabet, and disprove the hypothesis that it took many centuries and redactors to write it, which brings us to the third point that they try to state that this would prove, and that this would also make the what we call the documentary hypothesis moot, like increasingly moot. All right. It was made popular by Julia Wellhausen around 1878. And it actually stated that there were a number of redactors, which we call JE, P, and D. All right. Meaning different individuals, different priests throughout time added to the biblical text, or edited. But if what they're stating is true, the 5 books would not have been written by many individuals, but by a single individual such as Moses. Now, however, scholars were very skeptical of this press announcement, which was a year ago at first, because at this press announcement, there were no scans and no pictures provided about what they called an alleged Proto-Hebrew defixio. Now, I know about a Proto-Sinaitic, right? We talked about the alphabet, and we have Paleo-Hebrew, but we don't have Proto-Hebrew. And maybe what they're trying to do is make a suggestion by saying Proto-Hebrew that those that wrote this text had a accomplice with Joshua. So these must be the people that are in the Bible. That's what they're implying. But I think this Hebrew defixio is a made-up term. What they did show us in a press announcement a year ago was a schematic drawing provided by the individual who did the translation on the text, but no picture. Now, they said they had tomographic scans. It's kind of like a CT scan. Well, if you have scans, why not show us? Now, they had their reasons why they didn't, but if you're making an announcement, the oldest text that's going to do away with the documentary hypothesis, that's going to prove Moses has the earliest name for Yahweh, we would have hoped at least to see a picture, wouldn't you? If I wanted to say, hey, I got a coffee cup, and on my coffee cup, I have donuts, but I don't show it to you. But if I show it to you, then you know I got a coffee cup, but no donuts. But however, okay, so scholars were very skeptical. Now, however, this term, which we used, the Paleo-Hebrew, that could be suggestive also that there might have been Hebrews, but maybe that's why, once again, they just used that term Hebrew. At the press announcement, a statement was made, however, that there would be a peer review publication, that this would be soon forthcoming, but the scholars waited patiently for maybe almost a year. And finally, this peer review journal has arrived, and that's what we're going to talk about. In a release of this journal, the journal is called the Heritage Science, which is odd, because the Heritage Science is not a journal which specializes in archaeology or epigraphy. Epigraphy is the writing which the scans would show on this tablet. But isn't that what this was about? It's about the archaeology of finding this lead tablet, and number two, what it says. So why would it be in a journal that doesn't specialize or have those that specialize, such as those that would peer review this tablet or the scans? So heritage science actually specializes in a restoration of artifacts, one of their specialties in this article or the publication, and it is also a pay for peer review publication. Now, what does that mean? Pay for peer review. Well, if I got an artifact which I bought on the antiquity market and it had on it different types of writing, it probably will not be peer reviewed because it's not provenance. In other words, it did not come from an archaeological dig. It was not found in situ, if you will, the place of its origin. So with that in mind, it'd be hard to be in a peer review article if it's not found in situ. And this lead tablet, if you will, it was found in the discarded remains over 40 years ago. So it was taken out of situ, right, in the dig, and it was thrown away. And then the excavation team, we've got to give credit to their effort, went to those dump piles, took the debris to another location where they wet sifted. So definitely out of situ, which makes it hard, I believe, for peer review from an archaeological or epigraphical, if you will, journal. So and it's also pay review. What does that mean? Instead of somebody submitting an artifact or an article for peer review, you pay to have it reviewed. Interesting. Now, because of this type of selection in journal, some scholars have already stated that this could be an attempt to sidestep expert peer review from accredited archaeologists, philologists, and epigraphers. In other ways, they're trying to dodge the experts from actually making an observation in the peer review before it actually meets the public. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to display several scans from the tomography scans and also the schematic drawing that the translator of this alleged Defixio text had provided in the Heritage Science Journal. So now first, the scan has, number one, been enlarged. It was also orientated to correspond with the drawing, okay? So the scan to correspond with the schematic drawing. So you can easily observe the variety of different striations and also indentations on the surface of the scan. Now, they also used a type of device, if you will, or technique for scanning, and it's kind of like CT scans, but it's called tomography, and it's becoming more and more popular because number one, the inscription is not on the outer surface, but it's inside a folded tablet. So to get to that without destroying the tablet, they use tomography. Now, second, I'm going to show you the schematic drawing, which shows the different characters which supposedly support their translation of the text, which once again is inside the folded tablet. Now, after we compare what we see on the surface of the scan with the schematic drawing, I'd ask you, what do you see? Now, some people say they've seen letters. However, the majority of accredited scholars that have made statements or that have appeared in different articles, I'm going to name the scholars and their reply to this journal. First of all, Dr. Dan McClellan. He uses the term wishful thinking. Second is Dr. Robert Cargill. In his YouTube channel, he says there's nothing there. Dr. David Falk, his YouTube channel's Ancient Egypt in the Bible is getting more and more popular. He says it's pareidolia. That's a fancy word meaning images in the clouds, like green clovers and pink hearts and yellow moons. which also describes my box of Lucky Charms. One of the top epigraphers in the world is Dr. Christopher Rolston, and he says it's a Rorschach test. This is kind of like if in the movies, if you've seen somebody being examined by a psychiatrist, they show them paper with ink blots on it, and they say, "What's the first thing that comes to your mind?" And you say, "Oh, it's a defixio." But Dr. Dan McClellan also mentions, and I'm going to have to do some paraphrasing here, that the reading of the text requires an incredible, arbitrary, serpentine path in, around, through these many characters, which also vary in size, in orientation, and also in diverse forms. So what does he mean by that? Well, if I write a letter, and let's say just one letter, letter A, okay, my letter A's will probably look pretty much the same throughout the letter. Whereas if we have two people writing an article and they're handwritten, okay, using handwriting, then somebody else's handwriting and their letters would be different. But for one individual to write only what they're saying, 40 letters on a small text, and yet they don't all match, is very odd. Now, which means, of course, well, how many people wrote this little text? It's only 2 centimeters, probably one scribe, but what are they really seeing, right? That's what they're saying. What are they really seeing on this little text? Dr. Robert Cargill makes this statement. It's like a drunken ant at a picnic. Dr. George Sparks makes this statement. It's like an intoxicated camel wandering through the wilderness. And it's clear that it's not a type of writing which is typical of that time period for this early proto-alphabet form, in which there was no system of writing. So in other words, it's called bostrophonon, and it means as the ox plows. Sometimes a text could be written from left to right or from right to left, but it stays uniform. If it's left to right, it's going to be left to right. Or it could be from top to bottom, or it can be from bottom to top. But whatever form they use is consistent. It's not serpentine like this, not at all. All right. And that is called bostrophonon. Look it up. As the ox plows. Dr. Christopher Rolston made a statement in the Times of Israel. There are no actual discernible letters. Wow. Professor Christopher Rolston, an expert in Northwest Semitic languages in the chair of the Department of Classic and Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations at Georgetown University, wrote in an email that the authors of this article have projected upon a piece of lead the things that they wanted to say. And that's coming from the foremost expert of epigraphy in the world. That's tough competition there. Dr. Rolston added that he would have been thrilled with the discovery of an inscription, but he does not believe that this is the case. He was very suspicious at first about this discovery. Remember, there was no scans presented, no pictures, just a hand drawing. So he's got the right to be suspicious of this discovery when it was, of course, first announced a year ago. But now he's convinced through this peer review publication that there's not much there. Facts are facts, and this article is very short on facts and very long on boundless speculation. Rolston said the reading in this article are basically a chimera, which means mythical, means pies in the sky, my box of Lucky Charms. In conclusion, Dr. Dan McClellan listed 3 observations. First, it was a publication in an out of specialization journal. Second, that the scans that they show in the journal are not clear. And third, that the text in itself is just wishful thinking. So based on the pictures provided, the scans, and more comprehensive analysis will be needed, and it needs to be done by expert scholars. Once again, this is going to require another wait and see time period. But of the scholars that have already come forward, it seems that most have concurred and came up with this conclusion that what we have here, sadly, is wishful thinking. Now, if you would like more information on this curse tablet, you can go to YouTube channels. First of all, Dr. Robert Cargill. His is XKV8R. Dr. Dan McClellan. Dr. David Falk. His channel is Ancient Egypt in the Bible. Then we have Beneath the Bible. Also, What Your Pastor Didn't Tell You. And also Bible Unboxed. And lastly, IP, capital I, capital P. I know that you'll enjoy all these YouTube channels. Fantastic scholars, and they do a tremendous presentation. Remember, like and subscribe. Thank you for your time, lovely people, and I appreciate your joining us. Have a good day.